Welcome back to another DP TUBS video. Today we're going to be talking about removing silicone caulking from a bathtub. The silicone caulking here was from a previous shower door track, and we've got to remove it completely so it doesn't have a reaction with the final coat. So as you can see, this is a cast iron tub, and I'm going to take my scraper with my single edge blade and just go ahead and start scraping off the silicone. I'll also use 60 grit sandpaper. This is for my orbital, but you can use, the regular sheets of sandpaper. I go 60 to 80 grit, and I'll use that a little bit later once it's dry. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and start scraping off the large pieces of the silicone. So this tub is pretty bad. You can see the painters didn't really protect the tub when working over it. So in addition to removing the silicone, I'm also removing some plaster or paint that was oversprayed onto the surface. Looks like the paint primer on the walls was sprayed onto the tub. So I'm going to scrape that off as well, but my main focus here is getting all of that silicone off, because that's what's going to cause a reaction if I don't get all of it off once cleaned. So as I'm scraping, you might notice that I will flip the blade or the scraper over, so I'll get the sharp side of the blade. It's not that it dulls out completely, but for whatever reason it appears to do that, and then I'll flip it over and then it's got a better angle on it. It might just be because of the pressure that I'm putting on the scraper. The blade's hitting the surface differently, so as I'm doing it, I'll flip it over here and there. So as you can see, I got quite a bit off with my dry run, but you can still see some residue right there. You've got to really get some good lighting on it at certain angles to pick up some of the leftover residue. As you can see, I'm going to scrape some off right there just to give you a better view. So it's real hard to see. Sometimes you have to get the lighting at the right angle for you to see. And then another thing I'd like to do is I'll soak it, dry it off, scrape it, maybe sand it a little bit. And then once I dry it again, I'll go back over it, because the silicone residue will appear once it's dry. So there you go with my dry run. And now I'm gonna go ahead and start spraying it. So I'm just spraying it with some degreaser that I have. You could use like Goo Gone, you can use just any type of Zep cleaner. The silicone wasn't as hard or caked on as others, but this is going to allow me to see some of the areas that I missed, as you can see right there. So I'm going to go ahead, soak it, and get to scraping and sanding. So now that it's been sanded, I'm gonna wipe it clean, dry it off, and then I'm gonna take my single edge blade again and try to see if there's any more silicone residue on the surface. Now keep in mind, this is gonna prevent any type of fish eyes or reaction with the primer or the top coat. You'll see after I get that off, you can see some right there that I noticed from drying. I'm gonna go ahead and scrape that off. And then I'm gonna spray on the primer once I get the tub fully prepped. I'll spray on the primer. Now that's kind of like my last test to see if there's anything there, because even if the primer shows up a little fisheye, I can still get rid of it by the time I spray my top coat. Alright, so now I'm going to take my orbital with the 60 grit sandpaper and just run it on the top ledge. You guys might be thinking, wow, he's just doing overkill on this, but it's so important to get the silicone off, especially on that front edge. It's completely visible. It's one of the most looked at portions of the tub once it's reglazed, so I do want to make sure this is nice and smooth and that the residue's gone. Alright, so I'm going to scan it over one last time, and I'll also tack cloth it. Tack clothing it also does help because it will catch on it. You'll kind of feel it. So I'm rubbing the tack cloth across here just to see if it catches on anything. The silicone residue is extremely difficult to see. So now I'm spraying first coat of primer, and this is going to be my first immediate way of seeing if there's any little area where there's no residue, if it starts to fisheye a little bit. And as you can see, it did a little bit right there. Boom and boom. So those two spots that looked and felt completely smooth had a little reaction. So I'm gonna let it dry, set up. This is where you have to be patient and not just spray more. Just let it sit, let it dry, and then I'm gonna come back over it again. So after putting the second coat of primer, I went ahead and sprayed the top coat, and as you can see, totally fine, totally smooth. You have to make sure not to get too anxious and start touching it. You've got to just let the primer set up, spray another coat, let it fill in, and then with your top coat, I spray 2 to 3 coats of the top coat. You're not going to have any issue at all. So there you go, that's how I remove caulking, silicone caulking from the bathtub. If you'd like to see any other videos or suggest any other videos, please do so in the comments below.